The true man, she read, moves like the water, not striving against the current, but flowing with it. This was Wu Wei, the principle of effortless action, of non-doing that isn't idleness but perfect alignment. It was stop trying. It's not as a surrender to apathy, but as a profound invitation to a deeper, more effective way of being. Many people, Alara knew, mistook it for laziness, a convenient excuse for inaction. But Zhuangzi wasn't advocating for sitting idly by. He was whispering about a kind of intelligent natural flow, a state where one's efforts become so aligned with the inherent rhythm of things that they appear effortless. Almost magical, Alara thought of her friend, a brilliant graphic designer named Marcus. For years, Marcus had wrestled with creative blocks, deadlines looming like dark clouds. His work often felt stiff, forced, lacking the vibrant spark that had first drawn him to design. It's like trying to grab smoke, he'd once lamented. He was trying so hard, so consciously, that he was stifling the very spontaneity creativity required. Then, after a period of burnout, he found an old book on Eastern philosophy. Something clicked. He started taking long walks, letting his mind wander, sketching idly in a small notebook without a specific project in mind. He began to trust that ideas would emerge from the flow rather than being dragged out by brute force. When a new project came, he'd immerse himself in the problem, then step away, trusting his subconscious to work. Slowly, subtly, his work transformed, became more fluid, more innovative, as if his designs were simply unfolding rather than being manufactured. He was still putting in the hours, still dedicated, but the frantic trying had diminished, replaced by a quiet, confident allowance. This wasn't laziness, it was a deeper engagement, a more harmonious dance with the creative process. It was like a skilled sculptor who doesn't force the stone, but rather allows the form to emerge from it, guiding the chisel with an intuitive understanding of the material. The effort is there, but it's an effortless effort, born of alignment. Then, there was the case of her former boss, Eleanor. Eleanor was a force of nature, a meticulous manager, who believed success came from relentless control. She micromanaged every project, every person, every detail. She worked 18-hour days, constantly checking, correcting, and pushing. She was perpetually exhausted, stressed, and often ironically behind schedule because she was trying to do everything herself. Eleanor was the epitome of trying too hard. She believed that if she wasn't actively driving every single thing, it wouldn't happen. The system, however, was designed to flow, to function with distributed effort. Her excessive trying created bottlenecks and resistance. It was like trying to empty a flowing river with a teacup. The more she tried, the more overwhelmed she became. After a health scare, she was forced to step back. She reluctantly began to delegate, to trust her team, to let go of her need for absolute control. To her astonishment, projects started moving more smoothly. The team became more engaged and innovative, and she found herself with more energy than she'd had in years. She wasn't doing less, she was doing differently. She learned to observe the natural currents of her team's strengths and the project's needs, and to gently guide rather than rigidly dictate. Her non-doing was not idleness, but a higher level of doing, a strategic, intuitive engagement that allowed the collective effort to flow unhindered. A saxophonist known for his almost ethereal solos, he spoke about his practice routine, which was rigorous, endless hours of scales and improvisation. But when he performed, he said, he wasn't trying to play. He wasn't thinking about the notes, or the scales, or the theory. He was simply listening to the music, letting it flow through him, becoming one with the melody and the rhythm. The music wasn't something he was doing, it was something that was happening through him. The effort was immense in the practice. But the performance itself was an act of letting go, of effortless execution, a state of profound alignment. It was the epitome of Wu Wei in artistic expression. If he had tried to force each note, each improvisation, his music would have been sterile, mechanical. But by surrendering to the flow, by not trying to play, he unlocked a profound, almost magical spontaneity that captivated audiences. The paradox was clear. Mastery required immense preparation, But true performance required the transcendence of that preparation, release into effortless being. Wu Wei is often misunderstood because modern society heavily rewards visible effort, constant activity, and quantifiable results. It's about giving in to the natural rhythm of things. It's about recognizing when our trying becomes counterproductive, when our resistance to the flow creates more friction than progress. It's about the difference between rowing upstream with all your might and adjusting your sails to catch. The wind both require effort, but one is a struggle, the other an alignment. Think of a skilled chef. They don't furiously chop vegetables or violently stir sauces. Their movements are precise, economical, almost graceful. They understand the ingredients, the heat, the timing. They are in tune with the process. Their effort is real, but it's applied with such understanding that it appears effortless. They are not trying to cook. They're simply cooking, allowing the meal to unfold under their skilled guidance. The taste of the food reflects this harmonious approach. It's balanced, nuanced, perfectly executed. A chef who tries to hard might overmix, overcook, or force flavors, resulting in a dish that lacks finesse. The Wu Wei chef knows when to act and when to let the ingredients speak for themselves, when to intervene and when to simply allow the natural process of transformation to occur. Ilara considered the challenges in her own life. There was a particular friendship that had become strained, full of misunderstandings and forced conversations. The more she tried to fix it, to analyze every word, to engineer specific outcomes, the more distant they seemed to become. It felt like trying to grasp water. The harder she squeezed, the more it slipped away. She realized her conscious trying was actually creating tension, adding pressure that stifled authentic connection. She decided to step back, not in abandonment, but in a conscious act of non-interference. So we stopped overthinking every interaction, stopped demanding explanations, and simply allowed for space. She continued to be open, present, and kind, but she let go of the need to control the outcome. Slowly, surprisingly, the friendship began to breathe again. Conversations became more natural. Moments of shared laughter returned without effort. It wasn't about her fixing anything, but from presence, trust, and the willingness to let things unfold organically. It's about letting go of the internal struggle, to manipulate or control, and instead trusting in the inherent intelligence of the relationship itself. The core of Wu Wei is not about passivity, but about an active, profound awareness. It requires a deep understanding of the situation, a nuanced intuition, and the wisdom to know when to act and when to refrain. It's about seeing the natural currents and aligning oneself with them, rather than fighting against them. Allowing the gale to pass, only to spring back upright. The tree isn't lazy, it is wise. As the last rays of sunlight faded from her study, Ilara closed the book, stopped trying. It resonated in her mind, not as a command to cease all effort, but as an invitation to a more intelligent, more joyful way of engaging with the world. It was about finding the effortless effort, the perfect balance between intention and surrender. It was about trusting the flow, even when the destination was unseen. And in that trust, she realized, lay a profound power, a kind of quiet victory that wasn't about overcoming, but about harmonizing. It was the secret of the river, of the wind, of the skilled craftsman, and of the heart that understands that true success isn't forced, but allowed to unfold. Ilara's thoughts drifted to athletes. She remembered watching a professional tennis player, renowned not just for strength, but for their incredible feel for the ball, their ability to place shots with seemingly no effort. This wasn't weakness. It was supreme mastery. It's hours upon hours of practice, thousands of serves, volleys, and returns. In the heat of a match, they didn't try to hit the ball. They simply reacted, their body and mind flowing as one with the rhythm of the rally. Any attempt to force a shot, to overthink a stroke, would result in an error. The greatest moments of brilliance came when they were in a state of Wu Wei, a profound, effortless action born of disciplined preparation meeting intuitive presence. The effort was immense in the training, yet the execution was pure. Burdened by conscious striving, she thought of a martial artist, a master of Tai Chi, Their movements were slow, deliberate, flowing, almost like a dance. There was no visible strain, no overt exertion. Yet Alara knew the underlying power was immense. It was the power of yielding, of redirecting force, of moving with the opponent's energy rather than against it. A student trying to be strong might tense up, resist, and ultimately be overwhelmed. But the master, embodying Wu Wei, would flow, bend, and adapt, allowing the opponent's own momentum to become their undoing. This wasn't about being weak or passive. It was about a profound, subtle strength that came from perfect alignment with the moment, dynamic non-doing that was ultimately more effective than forceful action, even in something as seemingly rigid as problem-solving. Ilara recognized the principles of Wu Wei. There were times when she would wrestle with a complex research question, poring over texts, forcing connections, trying to logically deduce an answer. Often, she'd hit a wall. Her mind would feel jammed, like a machine grinding to a halt. But then, if she stepped away, took a break, allowed her mind to wander, a walk, a shower, listening to music, the solution would often appear, seemingly out of nowhere. It wasn't that she had stopped thinking. She had stopped trying to think, allowing her subconscious to work in a less linear, more holistic way. The aha moment was a manifestation of Wu Wei, an effortless emergence of insight after the conscious effort had been released. The answer unfolded, rather than being dragged out by brute force. This also held true in teaching, Alara realized. A good teacher doesn't just lecture or demand memorization. They create an environment where learning can happen naturally. They guide, facilitate, and inspire rather than force-feed information. They observe the unique currents of each student's understanding and adapt their approach, allowing knowledge to sink in at its own pace. Trying to force a student to learn often leads to resistance, frustration, and superficial understanding. But a teacher who embodies Wu Wei allows the learning process to unfold, trusting in the student's innate capacity for curiosity and discovery. The effort is in setting the conditions, in listening, in responding with nuance, rather than in rigidly adhering to a pre-planned script. Wu Wei, Ilara mused, was the ultimate form of efficiency. It was about expending the least amount of energy for the maximum effect, not by being lazy, but by being exquisitely intelligent. It was about understanding the inherent nature of things, whether it was the flow of a creative idea, the dynamic of a team, the movement of a body, or the current of a conversation. It was about responding to reality as it was, rather than trying to bend it to one's rigid will. The moment we stop fighting, she thought, is often the moment we begin to truly move forward, not by abandoning our goals, but by finding a smoother, more natural path to them. This wasn't an easy concept for a world obsessed with metrics, with visible output, with the constant need to justify one's existence through overt exertion. But Alara knew its truth resonated deeply. It was the quiet power of the unseen, the subtle force that guided a seed to sprout through concrete, or a river to carve canyons over millennia. It was the wisdom of understanding that sometimes the most powerful action is to simply allow, to align, to flow. And in that allowance, she saw not weakness, but an ancient, profound strength, a liberation from the ceaseless, self-imposed burden of trying. The wisdom of Zhuangzi was not an escape from effort, but a mastery of it, a dance with the currents of life that transformed frantic striving into effortless grace. The implications of Wu Wei extended far beyond individual pursuits. It touched the very fabric of society and governance. Alara recalled historical examples of leaders who, through forceful intervention and relentless control, often exacerbated the very problems they sought to solve. Like Eleanor, her former boss, their trying too hard created more resistance, more chaos. Conversely, she thought of periods of history marked by a more organic evolution, where societal change seemed to flow more naturally, driven by shifts in collective consciousness rather than top-down decree. These weren't periods of idleness, but of a different kind of leadership, one that observed, understood the currents, and gently guided rather than coercing. It was a leadership that trusted in the inherent intelligence of the collective, much like a good gardener trusts the natural growth of a plant. Providing the right conditions but not trying to force it to bloom, she considered the ecological message embedded within Wu Wei. Nature, in its wisdom, doesn't try to grow. A tree doesn't strain to reach for the sun. It simply grows, guided by its innate blueprint and the resources available. A river doesn't force its way through a mountain. It flows around it, seeking the path of least resistance, gradually carving its way over time. Humanity, in its striving, often tries to dominate nature, to control its forces, only to face resistance and unintended consequences. Wu Wei suggests a different approach: to observe, to understand, to align with natural processes, and to live in harmony with the environment rather than in perpetual conflict. It's about cultivating rather than conquering. Ilara also pondered the personal freedom that came with embracing Wu Wei. The constant trying often came from a place of fear of not being enough, fear of failure, fear of not meeting external expectations. It was a burden, a self-imposed prison of incessant striving. To stop trying in this sense was to release oneself from that fear, to trust in one's own innate capabilities, and to allow life to unfold with a lighter touch. It didn't mean abandoning goals or aspirations, but approaching them with a spirit of ease and acceptance, rather than anxious compulsion. The journey itself became less about forcing an outcome and more about the graceful dance of engagement. As night deepened and the city lights began to twinkle, Ilara looked out at the quiet street. The cars moved, the streetlights glowed, the wind rustled through the trees. Everything seemed to be in a state of continuous, effortless action. The universe wasn't trying to exist, simply was. And in that profound simplicity, she found a deep resonance with Zhuangzi's ancient wisdom. The true art of living, she concluded, was to learn to flow, to align, to trust, and to realize that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop trying so hard and let the inherent intelligence of life guide you. This wasn't a philosophy of inaction, but of the most profound and effective action of all. She considered how this principle could reshape the very idea of success, in a world that often equates success with relentless effort, burnout, and overcoming obstacles through sheer force of will. Wu Wei offers an alternative: success found in harmony, in efficiency, in the natural unfolding of potential. That peak performance isn't achieved through maximum strain, but through optimal alignment. The marathon runner who runs not by pushing relentlessly against pain, but by finding a rhythm where effort feels almost effortless. The entrepreneur who builds a thriving business not by micromanaging every detail, but by trusting their team and allowing innovative solutions to emerge organically. These are not signs of a lack of ambition, but of a deeper, more sophisticated understanding of how the world truly works. The path of Wu Wei, Ilara understood, required courage. The courage to trust, to let go of control, to listen to intuition. Over insistent societal demands, demanded patience, recognizing that some things unfold at their own pace, and it required a deep self-awareness. To distinguish between genuine effort and counterproductive striving, between effortless action and mere passivity. It was a constant dance, a delicate balance, but one that promised a life lived with greater ease, more profound effectiveness, and a deeper sense of inner peace. It wasn't about doing nothing, but about doing the right thing. It's at the right time, in the right way, with the least amount of friction. The silence of the universe, once daunting, now seemed to invite her into its vast, effortless flow, a silent symphony of being.